The HUD's committee will come to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Kennedy. Alderman Conway.
Present.
Alderwoman Cruzen. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderman French.
Present.
Alderman Carter. Alderman Coder.
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
We have 7 present and we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. I want to apologize for everyone. We can't start a meeting unless we have a quorum. And last week, I want to apologize. I got a little upset when we ended this bill a little abruptly last week. Whenever I do something where I get a little mad, I end up embarrassing myself, and I want to apologize to those who are down here. In defense of myself, let me try to give a little bit of an explanation of what happened. We have been conducting a review of incentives for the last year or so, and we are now in the beginning of the process of developing a strategic business plan for the city. It's something that I've been encouraging for a while. And we've kind of had a way of doing business here historically, and we're wanting to get a little bit more, I'm hoping that we can get a little bit more sophisticated in it. And so this last year, we've been hoping to do kind of a trial run. I can't speak for other members of the committee, but my thought is that we'd start acting much more like a loan committee at a bank. So if somebody comes in and they're wanting money from the city, that we start creating some objective measures for doing that. Now, I'm not wanting to change all the rules in the middle of the game until we have our strategic plan in place, because many times these development takes, months, if not years, to plan ahead, and it's not my intent to start changing the rules and, abruptly. But from the standpoint of providing information to the committee, there ought to be some standardized information that's provided to us that help us make a decision, and we've been kind of pushing to get that information. And I evidently, regarding this bill last time, there was some miscommunication on who was supposed to provide that information. So as a result, we were down here, and as you witnessed today, it's sometimes difficult to get a quorum together, and therefore we didn't have the information last week, so I relatively abruptly ended the meeting. So we now have, I think, some proper information before us. This is particularly a little different as well, because we're typically dealing with site-specific TIF program. So the incentive that we're talking about today is going to combine a site-specific TIF with an area TIF, and that's something that's a little different for our committee, and we frankly haven't had a good, we haven't had prior projects before us, so we're going to probably be fumbling around trying to understand the sources and uses and some of the financial information with us, so bear with us today as we kind of fumble through that. We're hoping to standardize all these processes so that a year from now we'll actually be able to have kind of a coherent process that'll be repeatable. So that is kind of before us. We were abrupt last week, so we didn't have a chance for the public to testify, so we're going to hold, even though it was publicized, we're going to go ahead and provide an opportunity for the public to testify. We're going to probably limit that to a couple minutes per speaker, depending on how we're doing on time, but that's kind of where we're going to go from here. So for those of you who are kind of new to all this stuff, we're going to go ahead and open it up to the sponsor, kind of take up where we left off. We'll start getting an overview of the project. We'll try to get everybody on the same page on the financials, give the committee some opportunity to get comfortable with the project and so forth by asking the sponsor and the developer any questions they may have, and then we'll open it up to the public, and we'll see where it goes from there then. So with that, Alderwoman from the 5th, you're recognized to go ahead and take up where we left off, and if you need anyone to assist you as far as giving us an overview, I believe everyone has emailed a summary of the project as well as sources and uses, and then the scorecard. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of Board Bill 93,
And what I would like to do is just give a brief overview of the project for those of us who weren't here last time. And I know that there's been some communication back and forth regarding requests for specific information. And I do think that we have done a good job of trying to educate people on that process. But once I give the brief overview, then I would defer to Otis Williams of SLDC so he can speak to the financials that I know everyone has some concerns about. So our ask here today is the approval of the project development agreement and the TIF ordinance for a combined total of $2.8 million. The entire $2.8 million is for infrastructure and public improvements, and I think it's important for me to reiterate that again, that it's specifically for infrastructure. It's not any money going in anyone's pocket. Secondly, I think we should remember that back in 2009, the Board of Aldermen approved the North Side Regeneration TIF. And now, in accordance with the development agreement, we're here asking to release the TIF funds for STL Grocery Project upon successful completion of the proposed public improvements. And most importantly, regarding this project, I think we should all remember that the location is currently a food desert. We don't have a grocery store. So it's important to understand the primary needs of the North Side, which are jobs, food, safety, and health care. And like I said, again, it's common knowledge that the North Side is a food desert. What STL Grocery brings is both food and 72 new jobs to our community while offering people fresh and locally grown fruits, vegetables, meats, and poultry. So at this time, I'd like to have Otis Williams come up and speak to the financials regarding the project.
But before we do that, does anybody have questions about the overall structure? So we're talking about a grocery store, I guess or a C-store, is that a C-store? And then a considerable portion of the TIF proceeds are actually going to be used for the infrastructure
That's
itself.
correct.
As far as the infrastructure, I think we have a site, do we have a site plan up here? Is it my understanding that the infrastructure is going to actually enhance not just this property, but will it enhance other property as well? So that it will create additional development opportunities, or, I guess we don't have a map up here.
Yes, sir. I'm Otis Williams with St. Louis Development Corporation, and the infrastructure is to not only support the project, but the immediate area around it as far as infrastructure. So there are some requirements as the developer spoke with the street department as to some modifications to the traffic lanes, and so there were costs incurred as a result of that.
I did have a question. Sure. So specifically, what infrastructure improvements are being made?
Well, what I'll do is go through that, but essentially, there's a turning lane. If you're familiar with the touchdown where the bridge, the new bridge comes in at Cass Avenue, as you continue toward downtown, there is a turning lane, but also if you're coming from downtown going toward Illinois, there would be a left turn lane that is also required to be put in, as I understand it. But then there's when they first put the road in, there was some construction that was done that essentially now needs to be modified in order to be able to service this project. So the elevation, in fact, please. In fact, if you don't mind, I can have Bill Laskowski, who is representing the developer, can speak to what the improvements are that they specifically are.
Yeah, for William Laskowski with M Properties. For those of you who weren't here last week, we'll go through a little of the context here. As Tammika said, we're here for really the improvements on Tucker, for reconnecting O'Fallon Street, and for doing some sewer work that was internal, that really was a result of the AARA project that the city had for extending Tucker. We actually went back about 10 years ago and brokered a deal with the state of Missouri to extend the bridge landing, which was going to terminate at Cass Avenue. That's how we end up with this picture here, where the bridge did not stop at Cass. It continues through and it goes all the way to Biddle and O'Fallon Street and connects beyond. So the two projects, the C-store and the grocery store, are located at the end of that improvement at O'Fallon Street and Tucker. And all of the improvements that are included in this TIF are simply for that. There's a couple exhibits here that show on the grocery side, and then again on the C-store side. Because of that ARRA project, and by the way, we helped to put that together with the city in cooperation with them as well, after dedicating the right-of-way through part of our property to make that happen. The project has improvements that would take out the existing bridge, in essence, at O'Fallon Street. When they put this in, the city didn't want to go deep into the ground because that might stop them from getting their shovel-ready project. So they kept the elevation of Tucker much higher than they normally would have had they had more time to figure this out. So if they really had time to do that, almost all of these costs that we're talking about here would have to been incurred. In essence, to gain the improvement short-term with the ARA money, they kept the elevation high. That resulted in O'Fallon Street being completely closed. Right now, if you go there, there's kind of a bridge and abutment. There's ramps, there's stairs and things like that, street lights and standards. To reconnect all those things, that all has to be torn away. And then, in essence, a ramp that reconnects O'Fallon Street at the same elevation as Tucker has to be carried 300 to 400 feet back into the neighborhood that it used to connect to in order to make these sites viable again. So in addition to that, after meeting with Deanna Venker and the folks of the city street department, they came in and analyzed, what was happening here traffic-wise. So there's also improvements, as Otis said, to the middle of Tucker, where the entire internal median that's there would be removed for 300 to 500 feet, and a left turn lane installed at O'Fallon Street that allows the traffic to flow the way it needs to with these projects in place. So in addition to that, there's a few light standards that are in the way at this point with how these curb cuts want to work. And by the way, we're working with the curb cuts that were in the existing ARI plan for access to and from the sites there. So there's traffic signalization then of necessity once O'Fallon Street is reconnected. Pedestrian crossings have to be redone, so the existing stuff gets pulled out, new buttons put in place for pedestrian crossing across O'Fallon, same for crossing Tucker, and then new signals to allow not just the three-way stop there, but the four-way traffic. The other thing that I didn't mention.
So I apologize. Going forward, when we do these things, a location and geography is really important. So, Mr. Clerk, we're going to need to, every time we have one of these meetings, we need to have a computer, a PowerPoint, so that people in the audience can see this as well. We're up here looking on a Google Earth, but, I mean, this should be something that's kind of available for all of us.
I got another board here that might be.
Okay, so what you're saying is by doing this, you're going to create development opportunities for the.
Some of these maps are the same, Chairman. We put arrows on there to show, exactly where the location is. If you hold the short end at the top with north, you come off of the bridge landing and come south several blocks to where you cross the O'Fallon Street, and that's where the two projects are located. I got a board back there, Lynn. Can you pull my set of boards?
Can we look at some of those things as well?
Sure.
Is there extras here?
Go ahead. So the first one that I held up here would be coming from an aerial point of view off of the bridge landing. And both of these projects frame your view on the left-hand and right-hand side. Thank you, Lynn.
So then the green area that's not being developed, I guess that would be kind of to the northeast of your site?
Correct.
Is that at grade?
Yes.
So that land is all going to get a pop in value, so later on, somebody will be able to develop that then, is that correct, or?
Well, yeah, the land is where it is before. I don't understand your question.
Talking about the infrastructure development that that you're going to start now,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
site will be able to,
Yeah, and I didn't, right before you were talking about this location issue, the last thing on the plate for the TIF is actually straightening out some of the storm sewer system that's on this side of the street here and on that side of the street.
So that'll all become developable?
Exactly.
And
So
then who owns that property?
that's part of this, and it sets the table, as you're thinking here, for this then to be ready and developable, correct?
Okay, and your partnership is the owner of that
Yes,
as well?
exactly. So when the city again did that ARA project, they worked with MSD, and there's a saddle right in the middle of that whole extension. And to make things easy on themselves and to maintain their shovel-ready status, they simply took a lot of that storm drainage and they made it come into these sites here. And they actually tapped into some of our, what used to be private lines that were crossing in that property. So MSD and the city are now pursuing us to, back then, to get easements that would turn that into a public easement. We've been working with them then to redirect that. Part of this TIF work does that, to redirect that flow and get it closer to the right-of-way, which is out of everybody's way at that point, and it allows the free placement of different buildings, parking, and all the other structures that you would have with the new development, including our two new sites, obviously. So that's my shortest summary of what the TIF work's all about, and again, it's about $2.8 million.
And 1.8 of that's in the public right-of-way, and 1 million of it is for gap financing for your project? then?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I get carried away with asking all the questions myself, but are there any other questions from committee members that, if you raise your hand, well,
start with your list, get your list.
where's my list at? Go through the list here. Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions?
No.
Alderman French?
Yes. So, for the purposes of this bill, you are considering the grocery store and the gas station one project?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have a breakdown between the cost of the two projects? I mean, I say that because obviously, while one can be argued to fill a gap in a food desert and serve a public good, the other, the gas station, we don't usually give tips to gas stations. I mean, I don't think that, there's a lot of gas stations opening up in the city without public financing.
We're not giving one
I understood that point from the sponsor too, who said that this is for infrastructure and does not go into anybody's pocket. But if not for this, wouldn't the developer have to cover that cost?
Well, these sites are not developable the way they are right now because of all of the infrastructure that was done prior, so this is a little bit of untangling what was accomplished through that whole rebuilding of Tucker. So the curb cuts that are there, the access to both sides of the street would be affected, and the sewers are on both sides of the street as well. So, I think it affects both sides, and I don't remember offhand the total breakdown in my head, but, it's probably, as much on one side as there is on the other. The improvements for the signalization, it's going to be split equally between the left side and the right side, so that all of those costs that we're doing, I think, affect both projects.
Okay, so roughly 50% goes towards the gas station. And
I don't have
50%
it memorized in my head here, I can.
goes to grocery store.
But essentially, though, the real need is to prepare the sites and to prepare the infrastructure that leads to the site. And in fact, both parts of the project do support the entire financing for, so it would be impossible to do one without the other in this case.
Why don't, if it's all right, Alderman, what I'd like to do, just so we can kind of, this is pretty complicated, I think, for all of us to follow. Why don't we go ahead and ask questions about the sites, make sure everybody understands the structure and the site, what's going on with the site, and then we'll provide our executive director of SLDC the opportunity to kind of walk us through the financials, which I presume is what you're going to do in a minute with the with the sources and uses. So are there any other questions regarding the site? We'll kind of hold it to that if that's okay, and then we'll come back and provide opportunities to ask other questions.
I just had one question, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
Alderwoman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I understand correctly, the $2.8 million for infrastructure will be going for reconnecting O'Fallon Street, crosswalks and sidewalks, addressing some sewer issues, and signalization. Is that correct? Are there other, I'm trying to wrap my head around $2.8 million worth of infrastructure. It's such a large amount, and it's fairly small site. And so where's the $2.8 million?
Essentially, though, there's 1.8 that is specifically infrastructure, then you have other costs that will be associated that are site-specific, and
Okay.
there's also a SID that is part of it, and I'll walk through that in the financials to tell you more about that.
I just,
There's also design costs and, you know, those kinds of things that it takes to draw the drawings and all that too, that's included.
sure, and the $2.8 million worth of infrastructure is coming before a board of 28 aldermen who each get roughly $300,000 of infrastructure money for their entire wards for a year. So I'm trying to understand exactly what the $2.8 million is for. I just want to line item it out. Reconnecting O'Fallon Street, crosswalks and sidewalks, the sewer system, and the signalization. Is that correct?
The four big items, yes.
Okay. Those are the questions I have.
And each one of those, I mean, when you say it as one item, they run hundreds of feet, you know, station points on the road, so they're substantial in their length and breadth and retaining walls and all the other structures that it takes to rebuild on the edges of the roads. For instance, on the ramp down from O'Fallon Street, because of the grade, you have to hold back the rest of the earth. So there's all kinds of other structure involved in maintaining and doing those roads. I'm sorry. Pardon me. Yeah, I was just making the point that there's retaining walls and all sorts of other earth supporting structures that it takes to do those improvements as well, and that they were fairly lengthy in their station points, hundreds of feet, not just limited to, you know, the width of Tucker per se.
Understood.
Alderman Codard, any questions? Alderman Green?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
I had a clarification. So just to clarify, clarifying the answer that you gave the previous alderman here, but you also stated earlier that of the 2.8 million, 1.8 was in the public right-of-way and about 1 million was on private land. So what is the, of the improvements she talked about, changing the street, the signals, is that on the public right-of-way?
Yes.
And then what is occurring on the private land?
In essence, that whole field of the sewers that run in all these directions.
The sewer
that the
improvements.
city's connected up to across our property. So it's intercepting those, collecting them into common points, redirecting them back into the right-of-way of Tucker where they remain out of the way for the upcoming development of both our new projects and the upcoming projects.
So that sewer work is roughly $1 million.
I don't have the breakdown. Yeah, it's a major component of the whole deal.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Executive Director, you want to take over and walk us through the financials then?
Sure, and I'm going to ask John Ferry, financial analyst, to come forward as well. But essentially, I think that you all have a packet that looks like this. It has the sources and uses for the Greenleaf project in front of you. So you see the sources that are at the top. There's a bank loan, but also Pace Equities, which is this is our Clean Energy Development Board project, which is the feature where you're taking advantage of clean energy as far as being able to finance that. So those are the funds coming from that. But then there are also new market tax credit funds, an EDA loan, and then the breakout as you see here for the TIF. But then you see the uses that are below, and that is a total project for both the grocery store and the Zoom store as well. But if you look at the very bottom, you see the TIF summary, that there's 1.8 million of that is coming from the area-wide portion of the TIF, but then the site-specific portion of the TIF is, in fact, the 690,000, and there's a SID that is also part of this project, which is 310,000, which makes up the 2.8 million that we're asking for here today. On the second page of your handout is a breakout specifically of the site cost summary for the site itself, and hopefully you'll be able to take a look at that. But I'm going to ask John to then walk through the analysis that we did based on that information that we provided here. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a quick question? Sure. One quick question here. So in what you just described in the TIF financing summary, the area-wide TIF revenue, that $1.8 million, where is that coming from?
that's already in the special allocation fund for the Northside Regeneration TIF area.
So this is what is accrued
Yes,
since
right.
we first passed this?
Correct.
Okay. Is that 100% of that pot right now?
The last calculation which was over 6 months ago, was 1.3 million, but it's accumulating at about 400,000 to 500,000 per report period, and so that is and so we met both with the comptroller and her staff, and I think we're all comfortable at that number.
Okay, thank you.
This is a little different for our committee, just so everybody sorry, getting lazy here, lean up. Just so everybody understands, we're used to doing typically site-specific TIFs. What we're going to end up doing is combining a site-specific TIF with an area TIF. So it gets a little complicated. Prior to my chairmanship, we sponsor, there was a area TIF that takes in, what was it, 1,000 acres or something like that. So the natural growth of taxes from that area, or at least a portion of the natural growth of taxes for that area, is collected and segregated in a special allocation fund. And it is specifically dedicated for infrastructure improvements for an area. So the idea is that gives a part of our city that had been long neglected an opportunity to actually keep some of their own tax revenue that's growing within that area to begin addressing some of the physical needs from within that area. So that money would have otherwise gone into, the general, the general budget of the city or the school system or whatever, but instead it's being kind of collected as it grows. It doesn't go below the base level, but as it grows, it's being collected and set aside in a special allocation fund, and that is the approximately 1.4 million, did you say? And it's growing at about $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So, okay. So does everybody kind of understand the difference between that and then there's going to be a second component of this, which will be new tax revenues that's generated as a result of this specific project. So, okay. Jonathan, you want to go ahead and take over for us now?
Yeah, thank you, Otis, Chairman, and members of the committee. So everyone has this document, I presume. If not, I've got extra copies. Does everyone have this? Okay.
It's the third page inside of the other document.
So what I'm going to focus on primarily is this chart that you see in the middle of this front page, and then the sort of economic financial scorecard, as it's titled, which is on the bottom of the next page. So this graph tries to portray visually what the annual cash flows are that are captured in that scorecard on the next page. What this represents, these numbers come primarily from projections from the developer in terms of what their sales taxes are going to be, and then also some estimates on my end on what the substitution effect might be on the project. I had to, develop the substitution model based on a number of assumptions given limited market data. But what this results in, this gray sort of column that you see here, is what I am projecting will be the revenue to the city spun off from this project before any incentives, but after the substitution effect. The yellow bar is essentially what the value of the property tax capture and the 50% of EATS capture would be over the life of the project. It should be noted that if the revenue projections are actually met, that this would, it should pay off relatively quickly. If you look at, these are nominal values, but if you look at the, the value there, it's over $120,000 per year in incentive value. That $120,000 is only basically going to pay back the, the site portion of the TIF, which is less than $1 million. So in theory, it should pay off relatively quickly, and so those yellow bars would go away rather than, last the full 20 years. But I wanted to put it this way in case the projections aren't met. What those horizontal or nearly horizontal lines represent, the blue represents what comparable sized acreage would generate in taxes in that specific neighborhood, and the orange represents how much needs to be generated in order for the city to meet sort of its sustainable needs in order to basically fund all of its infrastructure improvements that are necessary for the area. Well, not just the area, but citywide, sort of making an average for the site. And then the blue at the bottom is the net amount of tax revenue that the city will keep after the substitution and after the incentive is paid off. Again, what you can notice is that if you add the blue and the yellow bars together, you would get the gray bar. So if, as I said earlier, if the TIF is paid off early, then essentially that blue bar would become equivalent to the gray bar. And so that is, flipping to the next page, looking at the scorecard and just kind of explaining, that value score comes from a formula that basically compares that gray bar to that orange line. So compares what the economic value is of the project to what the sustainable requirement is that's been calculated. And so because it's so much substantially higher than that orange line, that's why it gets the 18 points, which is the maximum possible. You'll see on the revenue score, however, it's quite a bit lower. It only gets slightly more than a third of the points possible, and that's because of the, because it basically is only about a third of what the neighborhood average is. The increment score is how much, how that blue column, that blue bar compares to what the existing revenue is, and on this project, the existing revenue is almost nothing. It's about $1,000 a year to the city, I believe. So anyway, all those values get put into the formula which gives this score. What's important to keep in mind here is that this scorecard that I have here, this financial piece, is actually only intended to be one component of a larger score. So there's 40 points possible out of the financial end. In order to, the way that we've been designing it currently is that it has to have a minimum threshold of points in order to pass each of the individual components. So there's this component, there's the urban design component, and there's the architectural and the core components. So that minimum threshold is 60% of points possible, which would be 24 points. But in order to pass the overall scorecard, you would need to have 70% of the points possible, which would be 70 points. So that is important to keep in mind. So standalone, this passes the individual component. That's all I can say as far as the financial end goes. I can't speak to the urban design or any of the other qualities of the project, architectural or anything. I guess I can open up to questions. I've got the project gap analysis here, which is the same thing that we've been using, that Barb Geisman put into play years ago. And then the next page after the scorecard sheet just is a sort of a summary, sort of notes, footnotes that go with the scorecard. One data point that's interesting is that the average revenue per square foot for this neighborhood is about 24 cents. It's 38 cents is the sustainable value. So you may recall other projects we've looked at, like downtown is something like $11.80 per square foot is the average. And then below that, I've got projections of what I think the short and long-term return on the investment would be to the developer. So I'll turn it over for questions.
On the sources and uses statement, before I turn it over to committee members here, I want to make sure. So there's a loan coming from Cedar Rapids. Pace Equities, I've had that explained to me that that's going to be some debt that is financed as a result of the SID. Is that correct, or?
Well, let me turn to maybe it's Larry Marks or either Larry Chapman either to speak specifically to the.
Hi there, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. First of all, my name's Larry Chapman. I am, just to let you know, I'm not the developer, but I'm here on behalf of the project because I do believe in it, and I have other reasons in the area to want to support it. But anyway, if you go ahead, I'll be happy to answer, sir.
What is, I'm looking at the sources and uses statement. The second item on the sources column is Pace Equities. What exactly is Pace
Correctly.
Equities?
When you do certain kinds of sustainable improvements, PACE provides a program where they loan you the money to create equity at a lower than market, but only for that amount, lower than market rate. So if you're going to do things like solar cells on the roofs or special insulation or anything that helps your sustainability model, then they provide a financing vehicle for that. So if you look above, you'll see PACE equity. If you look below, you see PACE expenses. Whatever that number turns out to be documented, they become identical, so they equal out on sources and uses. It's just a low interest rate funding to help create sustainable development.
Oh, is that a loan from,
From PACE, it's a program.
is it a state program or a federal program, or?
It is I don't know if I know it's available in the state. I've talked to those folks. I'm using it on other projects. I don't know the sources of
It is a
it.
local program that we have here through SLDC. It's run through our Clean Energy Development Board. It's property assessed clean energy, and we work with the assessor to cause that, with the assessor and the collector to make that happen.
On 2 projects.
But who subsidizes the cost of it? Is that something that,
But there's actually a loan that is, they work through a bank. So generally, in the past, we've used PNC, but it's usually a bank.
okay.
Collaborative that's also
Yeah, so
supported by
it
the
is not
federal
city
government.
funds.
Right,
And
it's
then-
a self-assessment. You create a self-assessment to repay the loan, but you fully pay the loan. It's just they manage the credit by using the program, so you get a reasonably good rate.
And then we have new market tax credits at the net amount,
That's correct.
and then a loan is from,
The loan is,
DDA.
yeah, the EDA loan.
and then the $2.8 million in TIF. So is 1.8 million of that's going to be just cash that we have sitting in the account, in the special allocation fund for the area-wide TIF then?
It would be based on that value, yes.
But, no, they're not borrowing against that, though.
Well, during construction, yes, because remember, you don't issue the notes till construction is complete, and so you can't cash in until the construction's complete. So you get the ordinance passed that says the note will be issued. Then when construction's complete, you issue the note. And then once it's issued, you can ask the special allocation fund to pay that share. So it would be paid at the end of the project once
So,
completed.
but there will not be a $2.8 million TIF note outstanding. There's going to be
An
for any
agreement-
period of time at all, is that right? Because we're going to take this special allocation and pay that off right away, are we not?
Right, but what'll happen between now and then is an ordinance will be passed to issue a note. They'll take the ordinance to the bank and say, please lend us the money so we can build it. Then, once they're done billing, they'll be able to pay the portion of the dollars that are in the special allocation fund, whether it's 1.8 or it may still be 1.4, we don't know, but whatever that is would pay that first. And then any payments above that would have to come from future revenues from the project, either the TIF or the CID.
Okay, but the special allocation fund for the area-wide TIF, our commitment from that is not for more than $1.8 million. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
And then for the remaining $1 million, that's site-specific work,
Correct.
that is going to be paid exclusively from the tax increment of the two projects, is that correct?
Correct.
You know, and that's broken into the site-specific TIF, but also the CID as well. So
Okay, so they'll have a,
90,000.
is it 1% CID?
Yes, sir.
And then, okay, and then therefore, if these projections are anywhere close to being accurate, we should have that thing paid off in probably 10 years, is that right?
Looks like that, yes.
One of the things I'm concerned about is when I first came over, we took a look at a bunch of the existing TIFs and they weren't amortizing. And I was concerned about the level of interest rates and the fact that we have true arm distance relationships between the TIF note and the developer so that we're not getting, an inflated interest rate that prolongs the TIF repayment. So what will be the rate on the TIF note? Do we know?
I don't know, what's the rate you've issued here? It's probably gonna be a rate like between 7%, something like that. I don't know, the note's been negotiated yet.
I don't think it has. I
Okay,
think the developer will be.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that it's going to be amortized and not sitting around for 20 years.
Agree.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Let me go through the committee here. I believe I keep ignoring the fact that we have our president. He's hiding over there. Mr. President, did you ever get myself in a lot of trouble ignoring the president? He'll start ignoring me. Alderman French, did you have, Alderwoman Davis, I'm sorry, you're most senior.
Oh, okay. So one of the things I wanted to do was just bring a little simplicity to this. It is more than what most people can accept this early in the morning or on any given day. What I wanted to do was just to look at this very quickly and share some, a little bit better understanding. TIF notes are not a written check for cash to anyone. It is an incentive process that is used, and it's basically showing support to a project, to a financial entity, in order to leverage the possibility of the loan being made, and also assist in the upfront, like say for instance, if you have a line of credit somewhere on your credit card or something, that's basically what it is in the project. The TIF is the line of credit. When we finish these projects, at the end of the day, what we're looking for is the return on that line of credit and paid off as soon as possible. So when we do this, and I kind of took a moment last night to look at this, I came up with 12 years of payoff if everything runs smooth, okay? So then we have the opportunity, and nobody wants to take any longer than necessary to pay off, most especially if you're looking to do another project. And so it's easier to pay it off sooner, so you can move on to the next project, because we're not going to continue to leverage on top of each other. We don't do that here. I've experienced the area-wide TIF in the Grand Center area, and we've had that TIF operating, I want to say, maybe 13 years now, right about 13, 14 years. And so every process, they have to come back to this committee. Nobody gets a free will to just go out here and do anything they want to do. It's not like that. Every step of the way, they come back to this committee for approval. Also, in an area TIF, you find different opportunities as you move through the development process. So in some instances, I have taken entities out of the TIF area and let them stand on their own with their project because it was better and healthier for the project than being inside the TIF. The difference with this is, it is infrastructure. So we're not dealing with doing actual buildings with this TIF money. They've created SIDs and other things to help them with smaller things. So we're talking about infrastructure that technically belongs to you, the taxpayer of the city of St. Louis. So we are improving our wealth with this TIF. We're improving our ability to function with this TIF. So that I wanted to make clear as well. And we had not talked about that, and everything I read doesn't talk about that. And that's a very important part of this. Now, you've heard me on certain days, I don't feel good about certain things, and I'll let you know that. This particular part of this project I like, okay? because it's filling a gap. It's filling an important gap. When you look at that north area there, and that we don't have anything, and you know if you live near it, when you get in your car, you got to decide how far south or north or west you're going to drive in order to get what you need for your household. So it's really important that we do have this project materialize. And I know I'm taking a long time, Mr. Chairman, but I just thought it was important to let people know that. Now, what we don't do here, and it probably would be just an extra burden, but for me, I want to see the first performer that was done on the project, because that explains a lot to me, because I have a construction background. But if you bring that to the table, that's just another added confusion that probably we don't need, but it would answer some questions when people want to know about building things and constructing things and where is the money going to be spent and all of that. So the financials that we have before us, as I said last week, there's 4 lines on here that are the most important to us. And everything else is how he got to those 4 lines. And so for me, I'm okay with the numbers, and I see that the project can stand on its own with the assistance of the infrastructure part of this TIF, which is what the TIF is. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about TIFs, we pass different kinds of TIFs for projects. When you read that, when you hear about tax increment financing, it can be done in different ways. I sat on the TIF commission for 9 years, and I was a worst nightmare because I ask a lot of questions. Lawyers don't impress me because I'm going to make you dig deep, and I'm going to make you give me what I need to know in order to make a vote. And so I understand how complicated this is, and I hope everybody always feels free to ask the questions that they need to ask. Hi, Larry.
Hello.
Okay, I'm done, sir.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't like to disagree with my friend from the 19th, but I don't think it's that complicated, though. It's a $2.8 million subsidy to build a grocery
Oh, no,
store.
I know it's not complicated, but to some people it is.
Sure, it's a $2.8 million subsidy on a private project to build a small grocery store and a gas station. Pretty simple. But let me ask you about the specifics here. So we talked about this PACE equities, $2.6 million source of funding. Can you remind me again what PACE stands for?
Property assessed clean energy.
Clean energy. And what are the PACE expenses that specifically being covered?
I don't know the specific expenses there, but as was pointed out, there are eligible costs that will apply to PACE, and so only those expenses that are eligible is where the money will be spent. And so that number that's in the uses part of this will be exactly what is the eligible cost, and the uses in the source part will be the same. So so it shows us 2.6. That's the estimate that we think it will be, but it could be downward from that.
Sure, and if you can provide that to us at some point, that'd be good to see exactly what those PACE expenses are. It, I think, is a little ironic to use clean energy subsidies to build a gas station, but that's...
Well,
and did you have some information? Or is there some information being provided there?
No, it's just information on PACE. It's basically for things like solar cells and insulation, and other things that make you more energy efficient and sustainable. If they don't meet that criteria, and it's a loan, it's not a subsidy, it's a loan you pay off by self-assessing, an assessment on your property.
Okay. Regarding the scorecard here, in your model, did you include, did you put both the grocery store and the gas station together as one project?
Yes, I did.
Okay. In the data that you were provided, to come up with your model, did it show one being more profitable than the other?
I can pull it up real quick here.
Okay. I mean, I know that the grocery store business is a tough business. It's not a lot of profit margin in that.
I know that the grocery actually produces the majority of the eats revenue.
Okay.
Specifically, sales tax projections on the grocery store first year are estimated at $9.5 million in sales, where the sales tax projections on the C-store are $2.5 million. However, that doesn't include gas sales. Gas sales are not captured by the TIF, so they weren't reported.
Okay. All right. And in your analysis of the long-term return on investment, can you give me a breakdown of what that profitability index means, that 2.4 profitability index?
Yep. Profitability index is it's another way of looking at the return to the developer. So if you're familiar with how net present value is calculated, taking the discounted sum of the revenues and then subtracting off the original investment amount, the only difference is that instead of subtracting the original investment amount, you divide by the original investment amount. So a number that is greater than 1 is considered an investable project.
Okay. And for the audience, what would be a high profitability index?
Honestly, that's very hard to say because it depends on the project and the amount of risk that's being taken on. I would say the number above it is probably that's the modified internal rate of return. That's probably a little bit I guess easier to look at or compare because you can contrast that to like the rate of return you can get by investing in the stock market or by investing in, any other type of risk-based asset. So, here, what that means is that is their average rate of return per year. So average return, so it would be like, for instance, if you invest in the stock market, the average rate of return is between 6 and 8%. Here, their average return would be 10.4% per year.
Okay. And last question, as far as the ownership of the two businesses here, at the last hearing, it was stated that the developer, Northside, would be a part owner of these. Do you know the percentages?
Hi, I'm Paul McKee with Northside Regeneration. The ownership here of St. Louis Grocery Group is not the Northside Regeneration. It's split between two groups of partners, one from Good Natured Family Farm, who was here last time, if you remember Diane Endicott, from Kansas City, who will supply 55% of the goods in this store from natural, locally grown stuff. They're a major part of it, and the other piece would be private individuals led by my wife. That's the equity owners of this, not Northside Regeneration. Northside Regeneration is a seller of the land.
Okay. So the land would be sold, the new building would be owned by
the new entity called
new
St. Louis Grocery Group.
And as far as a project across the street, the gas station?
The same. They don't work one without the other. They're not financially doable, one without the other. They must be connected. And the USDA has provided a 70% guarantee on this based on both of them being together.
Okay. I don't think we asked many questions of the grocer before, but is this like a boutique kind of thing, or is this more
No,
of
not at all. Good Natured Family Farm that we've provided and quite a bit of information on has existed in Kansas City for over 10 years. It's led by Diane Endicott. Dr. Diane Endicott is a PhD, her and her husband, that have their own farm. They speak and have agreements with over 200 family farms in Missouri, in eastern Kansas, And they have been supported by the Kellogg Foundation for over $10 million, and they've operated for about 10 years, doing about $15–20 million in revenue. They now want to expand into St. Louis, and they've worked in the urban core of Kansas City with Ball Foods and want to come here, and the farmers want to be an owner in the store. Why is this so significant to us? Two major reasons. One, it brings fresh food. It's not just fruits and vegetables, and it's not just during growing season. They grow all year round. Many of them are in greenhouses. They also bring beef, poultry, pork, every kind of meat known, plus many of the staples. When we believe plus or minus 52 to 55% of the goods sold in the store and in the C-store will come from good-natured family farms. Why is that significant to the north side? Anyone that has an EBT card gets what's called double bucks. So $1 buys $2. So if they buy local and natural, the dollar buys $2. That's the good news. The bad news is we aren't allowed to charge sales tax on any EBT sales, so it doesn't help the tip. But we want to help our community first, so that's very, very significant here.
Okay. And the ownership of the gas station across the street?
Same, the ownership's the same in both. It's one entity that owns two things.
So the grocer will own part of the,
St. Louis Grocery owns both,
gotcha.
and the same percentages on both.
Okay. No other questions?
Mr. Chairman, can I clarify one other thing? You had asked about the tax, the existing tax that's sitting there. Northside Regeneration pays $475,000 a year in taxes within that TIF district. So a big part of that increment that grows every year is us paying taxes that was never there before. Okay?
Thank you. Alderman Kodar.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we look at this project gap analysis for just a moment, please? I just have a couple
Sorry, I
questions.
didn't understand what you said.
Can we take a look at this
Oh,
project
for the gap
gap analysis for just a moment, please?
Sure.
So the total cost of the project is $18.5 million.
That's correct.
Can you help me understand what the next line is, the developer fee?
Yep, so in this case, it's a deferred developer fee. I may actually have Larry explain how it works in this specific project. In a typical project, a lot of times what will happen is there'll be some amount of overhead or some amount of cost or whatever, something that'll be captured or will be incurred in the project that won't be paid to the developer until later on. But ultimately, it's revenue that goes, it's considered going to the developer.
Well, when I looked at these numbers and I did the adding, so I've got 18.5 million. The developer fee listed there below is subtracted, the 175,000. We've got 2.6 million in tax credits, which is also being subtracted. And then the next line is the one I really have a question about, which is the maximum allowed developer fee at $1.9 million, which is then added to the cost of the project. So the way I'm reading this is that the total cost is 18 million. We're subtracting out 2.6 million in new market tax credits, and then we're adding back in the maximum allowed developer fee of $1.9 million. Is that correct?
That is correct. This is, for better or worse, it's a formula that was developed by the Missouri Housing Development Commission, and it was co-opted for the city's purposes during the time period that Barb Geisman was here working
Okay.
for the city. The way that and what that max allowable developer fee is supposed to represent is it's supposed to represent the maximum allowed amount of profit that the developer can have if they're getting incentives. So essentially what you've got then is you've got your project cost minus any tax credits that are coming in, because we want to get to the net project cost, and then minus any sort of like fee that the developers are paying to themselves that's built into the project. So that gets you to some sort of net project cost, and then you add in your allowable profit to get what we call here the overall net project cost. So that's what that $17.6 million figure is. I think it's worth a serious discussion as to whether or not this formula needs improved or not, but probably not
Here today.
here today. Yeah.
So if I understand correctly, then the project cost is 18.5 million, and the developer fee is $1.9 million.
Correct.
And the developer fee goes to whom and to,
Why don't we take a moment and allow Larry to explain how, because it's
That's
smoke and
not-
mirrors here to be able to get it totally financed.
Yeah, it's also not correct that the developer fee is $1.9 million. That's the maximum allowable under a formula that was created by this office years ago. The actual development fee will be a percentage of the cost. In this case, it's $175,000 is what's being proposed and what's in the budget right now. Unless you look at the new market tax credit budget, which has to be a specified percentage, it's a little bit higher, but it's deferred and never collected. This is the only portion, the 175 is the only portion that's allowed to be collected or will be collected in real cash anywhere down the road. And basically what it is, it's a reimbursement of the developer's time and people and resources. It's the only fee that
Oh,
it's
sure.
going to make.
but I'm having a hard time understanding how these numbers, so the total project cost, why would we be subtracting off a $175,000 developer fee from the cost of the project? Why is that a subtraction?
I can't answer that question. This is a formula set up by the city to do analysis on projects. I can only look at what the true sources and uses are on the front page of this, which tell me where the cash is coming from and going to.
So,
Take a look at the front page, because that is true, as he indicated, that is.
These are where the money's really coming from and going to.
so what is the developer fee on this project?
The part that'll be paid is $175,000. The remainder is in the new market tax credit calculation, which is deferred and never collected. And it's about $700,000 on top of that, but that's another formulaic requirement of new market tax credits. It's not what's happening in real life. This is the real-life picture right in front of you here. Everything else is a machination created to do a certain kind of analysis for people to understand what they want to understand.
I didn't gain any further understanding from it.
I don't either.
Okay,
So
can
if-
we scroll down to the
Yep.
project economic financial scorecard? This was something in an email to the committee. I requested this total score and economic value of 26.1 to be put into some kind of context. It's very hard. I don't know what 26.1 means, nor do I have it, can I compare it to other projects and understand its value. And so, could we hand out this?
Yep.
Because I think this is worth taking a look at, looking at some of the values in other projects. And Mr. Chairman, I really commend your efforts over the last year or two to try and standardize this process. And I think having some kind of standardized process for viewing this is a worthwhile thing to do so that we can kind of compare apples to apples.
Yeah, I just hope you're patient with us. This is
Sure.
fairly complicated.
Absolutely.
Jonathan and I have already been
Yeah.
talking about over break, trying to even standardize it some more. So it's, it's pretty amorphous right now.
Sure.
We're trying to get it a little bit more.
So, I guess let me try and explain a little bit about what the score value is based upon. So as of right now, and let me clarify that this process, this whole formula, the whole scorecard is something that is in development. Even just tomorrow, I'm meeting with a technical panel of 10 sort of experts, people like Sarah Coffin from SLU and Bob Lewis from Development Strategies and a number of others. And we're going to be looking at the formulas and that sort of thing. But everything ultimately is based off of a set of requirements. And so far for the set of requirements, what I've set up is something that ultimately need to be approved and reviewed by this board and probably maybe even the full board of aldermen and LCRA. As of right now, what the value score is based off of is I based it off of the idea of what is a passing score. For us, passing score is 70% of the points possible, although as I mentioned before, in order to pass out of each individual component, you need 60%. So a pass here means that you got 24 points, which is 60% of the points. 28 would be 70% of the points. So What I set it up as was that 70% of the points, so in this case, 70% of 18, which is I think 12.6 points. If you look at that chart, if that gray bar was equal to that orange line, that would mean the project will get 70% of the value points. Does that make sense? So if that gray bar was equal to that orange line throughout the course of the project, it would get 12.6 points on that value score. To maximize, basically, to get to 18, it's if you get to 150% of the sustainable value or above, you get the maximum points possible on that portion.
So we are at, this project is at the maximum score value. This has the maximum value of any project possible.
On the value score portion.
So this is valued at the most valuable type of project in the city of St. Like, what I'm trying to understand is how this got the most amount, the most points possible.
So the reason is it's all based on a relative scale. We didn't want to, it's all based on the amount of revenue per square foot of land for the neighborhood average. So in other words, we're not going to compare downtown, which generates over $11.80 per square foot, to Hyde Park or Central West End or Grand Center or anywhere else, which they're much different. As I stated earlier, the average here is 24 cents per square foot is what's being generated. So because it's a lower economic threshold, it scores the max points much more easily. If this same project was in downtown, it would have a score of close to 0.
I understand.
So can I just comment? I mean, John, as Alderman has indicated, Alderman Rhodey has indicated, this is evolving. But I think what I want to say about this particular project, this is the first one out of the chute to try and make some key improvements in the north side, using the TIF that was put in years ago. And so using even our new formula, we're saying that we are, that this project, it gets a pass, and we're highly recommending that we move forward. We had many negotiations, both with the comptroller's office, with the developer, and with others, to try and ensure that we brought you something that was acceptable, to make sure that monies that were being provided were for infrastructure and for those things that were, quote, basically TIF eligible for sure. And so I think, we can get lost in these numbers, but I just wanted to sort of summarize it for you, we strongly believe that this is one that we, particularly for the first project that we have here, that we strongly support it.
And I think that's where having a standardization to the process will be helpful in the future to kind of understand what the numbers mean, because when I look at the bottom here.
Over the break, we will, the next time you see us in this format, we will have something that is simpler, that you will definitely be able to understand.
Because when I look here at the bottom and I see the incentive value of $2.8 million and the fiscal benefit to the city of $181,000, and I calculate that to be 6% fiscal benefit of the entire incentive value, it throws up a bit of a red flag, and it's confusing at best. Again, I do know that the developer here started accumulating property on the north side in 2003. This would be the first release of a portion of the $400 million that we've authorized in TIF money back in 2009. The year is now 2016. We've been moving at somewhat of a snail's pace, and it's been frustrating at best for the city of St. Louis. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, for the moment.
Go through this cycle, and I'll come back. Alderwoman Green, did you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when we, met a couple weeks ago to go through the incentive study, there were 3 areas that we were rating. We were rating on the economic financial scorecard, the architectural review, and the urban design review. But what I'm seeing in front of me is only looking at the economic portion, not the other two. And my understanding was that, like Mr. Ferry said earlier, that you had to have at least 70% of the points possible and 60% in each category. Where are the other categories?
Essentially, we, as I mentioned, that we're in the evolution of this, and so the last time we were concerned primarily with the economic portion of this, and so we did take a look at the other categories. But what will happen is as we get the design of these projects, I mean, actually get the plans and those things generated, then we'll take another look at those things.
So
But-
we don't have actual design
We
plans
do
right
not,
now?
unless, Dale, do you guys have, I don't think. No, we did not. We thought that the real concern here was on the economic portion of this, and so that was why we, because the other two, as we told you, we were looking at adding to this process, and so we had not evolved to that yet.
So for the current, let me make sure I understood this correctly. So for the financial scorecard, you needed 24 points to pass, is that correct? Would have been the minimum, and so we're at 26.1, so it passed by not a huge amount. So I really would be curious to see where it falls on those others, since the totality of it could end up putting this into a not passing point if that urban review study and the architectural review don't meet the standards. And so it seems like we're only looking at one piece of the puzzle right now, one that looks favorable to the project when there could actually be other portions that
Just let me
aren't.
say that we are, in fact, I'll say it again, that we are sort of evolving over time, and that when we briefed you, we were telling you that these are the three things that we will be looking at. We just haven't gotten there yet, but we will in the future, for sure.
So is there a reason why we need to move forward with this now rather than having the totality of the information?
Well, I think what we're asking is that there's a timetable on trying to get things started. And so this being, on the previous analysis of TIFs, we always use the market gap analysis, which was just financial. And so what we were bringing to you was essentially this, but we were also showing you what, if we were moving to the new formula, what it would show as well.
Okay. It just seems like, as Alderwoman Spencer was saying, we've moved at a snail's pace for so long, and now it's suddenly
Well,
do
part
this
of the-
now without all the information.
Part of the urgency is that the developer has several projects in the queue, this being the first. And so we had promised the NGA that we would have a number of things to start to happen. And so this is our effort to try and get that done. So we will have another shot at this apple when we come back with the next project, for sure, and be able to show you the full complement of all of the parts of what we are putting together. But just as he indicates, tomorrow we are going to be going to talk with other technocrats, if you will, to try and refine even the formula that you have in front of you. So, I mean, it is a moving target.
Okay.
And I would hate for us to get locked in on a number today when the next time you see us, we may have a different way of getting to a number that would all be altogether different. So I would not like to penalize this particular project when we think it's a good one that we can move forward on.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
I promised the alderwoman from the 19th that we'd circle
I
back
yield
around.
to her first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add one thing. In 2013, or excuse me, in 2010, when we started this project of accumulation of land, the north side in this area didn't look like this. It didn't look like roses, but the economic activity there was not zero. And as you mentioned, this project wouldn't pass TIF muster downtown, wouldn't pass TIF muster in other parts of the city. And what I'm concerned about is that, a large part of the reason why it passes TIF muster here is because the economic activity has been so depressed in this neighborhood. And the reason why, a large part of the reason why it's been so depressed is because years of accumulation of properties by the developer that we're looking at here today. And so we've incentivized, we've now allowed that to take place over a decade and a half of degrading the economic activity in this area to now use that as the sole reason why this makes economic sense. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
May I make a comment, just Chairman? Larry Chapman. So I just want to say a couple of things, because I've kind of been watching this from around the outside, and albeit a little bit recently, but it really wasn't until the end of 2013 that the Supreme Court decided we were still in the hangover recession. All of the property acquisition and all those activities are the sole reason that we even have a shot at having NGA stay here, which is now happening. Had that not gone on, NGA would have not even considered the city of St. Louis. And I will tell you, I had the pleasure of doing lots of meetings with Otis and his team at SLDC to help resolve a lot of issues that we needed to resolve to get NGA here. And when we worked with NGA, I adopted a little philosophy in my head that the whole winning of that was based on a three-legged stool. The first leg was delivering the site. That's been figured out. Hopefully that's going to get under contract soon. The second leg was creating access. They worked with the state to develop a financing mechanism to not only deliver the site, but to improve the roads so they could get to and from the site from the major interstates. The third leg is the neighborhood, and that's the one we're working on now. We told the NGA that they would have a terrific neighborhood, and if you've read anything that Mr. Cardillo wrote, it's all about the neighborhood improving so the millennials and the other people who are his future employees will have a place to live. I view this project not as a project. I view this project as infrastructure. If you've got a grocery store that can provide this, then you'll have an opportunity to do other projects. We're working on a couple of residential projects right now, but if we don't have resources like this, we're not going to have market rate projects, which is what we want. We're going to have more subsidized projects, which I don't think is what you really want. I think you want to have a situation where you got to start somewhere and build from there. And that's exactly what this is. I'm frankly surprised you have a passing score on this at all, to be honest with you. I suspect, it's what Mr. French said, is that it's the C-store helping bolster it up so that it can't actually pass. If it weren't for that, I don't think it would, frankly. But you need the grocery. You just need it. It's going to be a terrific asset for the community, and it's going to allow a lot of other things to happen. Even the smaller residential projects that have already started there are going to get better because of it. And I think that this is really, if you're going to invest in something, this is the kind of thing to invest in. And that's just something I wanted to say. I just sat in all those meetings, and I know where their heads are, and everybody wants NGA to be a super big success, and this is a huge part of that and a big first step. So, anyway.
Can I respond just real quickly to the question earlier about as far as this project obviously not being able to pass downtown or somewhere else? And I think there is somewhat of a catch-22 there, because the goal of when we're trying to design this is we don't want to set a bar for areas that are economically weak where we say, oh, you don't pass, so you don't get any incentives, and so then therefore incentives don't ever go to areas that are economically weak. But at the same time, you don't want to have a bar that's so low that it does create a problem where projects that, quite frankly, don't benefit the city in the long run are able to get through. So that's why we added those other two components. So those other two components are meant to be a counterweight to that issue.
Alderman from 19th.
I was looking at the fiscal benefit for us again, and so annually, we're looking at about $181,000 towards paying off this incentive of $2.8 million, which means that we probably will pay it off much faster than what we were asking for, 23 years in here. So obviously, we can pay it off much faster than that, and we know that you always take the lowest amount of the lowest number in order for project to have success. But 9 chances out of 10, it'll be much higher than this on the payoff annually. So I wanted to, and I'm glad that you added the last thing there, because we do have probably 40% of the city left that is in conditions that no project would ever pass this muster if someone wanted to go into those neighborhoods. It just wouldn't. So we do have to look at this and analyze it a little bit different and see how we can make it not as confusing, number one, and also able to transfer different values into the projects as we do the fiscal notes on these. But the other part I wanted to say very quickly, too, is that, I was the worst. I always tell myself, I admit everything I do. So, I have been the thorn in your side since 2007, okay? I've never missed the opportunity to tell you that. And I've never missed the opportunity to tear it apart, because I'm good at that too. But I do support this because I'm finally seeing something happen. And if you can stay on this path and make good things happen, then I will support it. This part of the city is suffering. I cannot play games with some of the things that I'm hearing and reading and some of the suggestions that people have about what they want, just because they can say what I want. We've got to do some things, okay? So make this happen, make it a reality, bring the next project. That's what we need. So I'm not about who's there, who's selling the property, none of that. And I can't get into the ancillary things that are going on the side. That has nothing to do with what's before us today. So I am in support of the project, and I need to see things happen. I need to have my neighbors, because I live about 4 minutes from this. I want to be able to go to the grocery store without driving a long way and dealing with a whole lot of other things. And I want to get fresh fruit and vegetables. I love my fresh fruit and vegetables. So let's do something and let's make this right. Let's not get caught up dealing with a lot of baggage that we've carried through, because nobody has more baggage than I have, and I know that. So let's move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Alderwoman from the 15th.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions. Just looking through the parcel development agreement, there's no timelines in here. Some of the other agreements that I've looked at, there's been timelines for completion or some accountability metrics.
More often, we don't, when we do parcel development agreements, they are looking long-term, and we will do that. But this one is sort of imminent. We are looking to try and, obviously, if we get your approval, to be able to move before the fall here to get it done. So, I don't know, but I'll let.
Let me say one thing just before you say it, just to respond to that. First of all, I just want to remind everyone that until the project's complete, they don't get any assistance. So that's number one. I mean, it has to be completed to get a note to get any assistance. The other thing is, you asked a question about the urgency. The real urgency behind all this is there is an existing financing commitment that'll go away before everybody comes back in session, so there is a real reason for the urgency. But I'll let the lawyer explain the better parts of your question.
Sure, my name is Mark Spikerman. I'm with Gilmore and Bell. We're special counsel to SLDC on these type of deals. There's 3 dates to keep in mind. The first one is actually in the ordinance itself, the last section, section 5. Says that if the developer doesn't sign the parcel development agreement within 90 days after the effective date of the ordinance goes away. There's nothing. If they don't have the wherewithal to sign it in 90 days, we're done. The other things are in the section 2 of the parcel development agreement. There's 2 dates in section 2A. April 1st, 2017, they need to show that they've got all their financing in place. July 1, 2018, they need to submit a certificate of substantial completion.
Completion.
Okay,
So-
I'm sorry, Alderwoman, did you have another question?
Sorry. I was looking for, and then the severability clause, if they don't meet that, then this agreement would be void.
Right, if they do not meet that, then they are in breach of the contract, and we go to the, and then it's not the severability, but they're in breach and you can terminate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we've heard enough from the sponsor and the developer and others. We did want to provide the opportunity for the public to speak. We have another committee meeting scheduled at about 11 o'clock. I don't want to go ahead and make people feel rushed. My goodness, you've been very patient. Welcome to government and our slow method of moving here, but we're now going to go ahead and open it up and provide the, we're going to ask that we try to hold this to a couple minutes. We won't be real firm, but if we start running tight on time, we might have to ask you to hurry it up. Usually what we do is try to alternate pro and con. These things are always confusing, so I think we probably had some people sign up on the pro side that really wanted to speak against it. But in any event, we'll go ahead and start trying to decipher this. William Laskowski signed up to speak pro, is that correct? Okay, so is there a Barbara Manzera? Are you pro or con?
I have a nuanced opinion I would like to share.
Sure, go right ahead.
Thank you for making time for our neighborhood to offer our opinions. Some of you may know my name. I am rehabbing a six-family building on the 3200 block of 19th Street, which had been vacant for 5 years before I purchased it. Myself and my neighbors in the 3200 block of North 19th Street have invested at least $1 million in our two-block area in the last 10 years. We view our activities as important to the growth of North St. Louis as a commercial endeavor. You may know that a lot of us in the neighborhood sued at the city and state level to try to prevent the North Side Regeneration TIF. As the Alderwoman spoke, we are very concerned about the speed of the TIF. It may surprise you to know that I am not anti-TIF in general. I am opposed to stifling and punishing individual investors, residents, and small business owners who have poured their life savings into supporting a community that we all love. Our fears is that the TIF, the Northside Regeneration TIF, has strongly depressed individual investment in the area due to fear of eminent domain. And this additional TIF will continue to stoke those fears. That said, I am not against this TIF. What I would like to see is what one of the sponsors suggested was some support for the neighborhood. The third leg of the Northside Regeneration NGA effort is apparently the wonderfulness of our neighborhood, which I heartily support. What we would like to see is Mr. McKee, Northside Regeneration, and or whatever other businesses are doing business under whatever names, to become a partner to our neighborhood by working very closely with the Old North St. Louis Restoration Group in some way, shape, or form to determine the disposition of the parcels in the residential area, which is to the north and east of the TIF area, to be specifically north of Chambers and east of, at this point, 20th, I think it's 24th Street for the NGA, but certainly east of Florissant. If what we would like to see is an attachment to this bill legislatively in writing, signed, that says that the area that's north and east of the TIF area that was cut out of original plans for the TIF area will not be an area where eminent domain or TIF is used without the advice and consent of the neighborhood, as at this point represented by the Old North St. Louis Restoration Group. I am not a member of the Restoration Group. I was at one point and stopped being a member of the Restoration Group when I went into a political mode to fight against the TIF. The Restoration Group is not a political organization. What we are looking for is partnership. We do not want to be seen as collateral damage. We would like to be seen as partners. I know it's not always easy to have the pushy, nosy, involved neighbors show up at these events, clap, wait to speak, etc. But you all know as city dwellers, that we are the backbone of the neighborhood. You all know that you cannot succeed in building a community without the community. And we are the community that shows up. We are the community that takes time off of work. We are the community that takes money out of our pockets to litigate if we feel it's necessary to protect our community. I think everyone here in this room wants to see the north side bloom. Although myself and Mr. McKee could not be further apart on our ideological spectrum, I think at this exact moment we are united in wanting to see something positive develop at 13th and Cass. I want to see something positive development at 19th and Hebert. And I think that we could all work together if we were to engage in a partnership. To date, Mr. McKee has been unwilling to become our partner, despite many entreaties. And so what we would like is for you to request that he become our partner by making it a condition of your approval that he would enter into some sort of a fruitful partnership with Old North St. Louis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is, well, I guess, I'm sorry, ONSL, Old North St. Louis, Travis Sheridan. Travis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. A couple of things. I'm Travis Sheridan, resident of Old North St. Louis, board chair of the Old North Restoration Group. A couple of thoughts that I'd like to share. Since 2004, Old North Restoration Group has helped bring over $50 million worth of development into the neighborhood. Most prominently, you can see that on the 14th Street Mall, which is 100% leased on the commercial side, and the residential side, the apartments above, are also 100% leased. We have a desperate need for additional residential in the neighborhood. We have also during that time has been when Mr. McKee has been assembling land within the neighborhood. But that land and parcels that have been assembled there's not been an attempt to stabilize the properties or rehab the properties. And so over the course of 13 years, they have continued to deteriorate, and they're in worse condition than they were back in 2003. There are two quotes that I wanted to pull personally out of my appraisal when trying to purchase a home in Old North. The first quote from the appraiser is, "There are some signs of renovation, however, most of the neighborhood is waiting for investments that have not yet occurred." The second quote, "Most of the sales in the neighborhood are corporate-owned sales, which has a negative effect on the value of homes." What we are asking is for a condition to be put on this bill that the 65 units and parcels, and I have shared a map of the parcels that are within the Old North Restoration Group boundary. About 27 of those still have structures on them. The rest are all vacant. But we request that those 65 parcels be donated to Old North Restoration Group for us to help develop. We'd like to use examples as Soulard, Lafayette Square, Tower Grove South as the examples of small incremental improvements that are done by neighbors, for neighbors, by community, for community, and that we are not seeking, and Old North is not a silver bullet type of community. I heard one of the alderwomen say that something needs to happen, and we truly believe something does need to happen. When looking at traditional lending criteria, everybody mentions the 4 C's: collateral, credit, score, capacity, and character. We think that this donation and this move by Mr. McKee to donate the properties to Old North would really help increase the level of character for him and for his project. We also have seen that there is obviously not the capacity to rehab these projects or to maintain these projects, the 65 parcels that he has within the Old North Restoration Group. And so we would like to take those on so that we could work with other neighbors to have that capacity. When Alderwoman Hubbard mentioned the 4 areas, the food, the jobs, the safety, and the health that are really necessary for revitalization, we would agree. On the food side, the Old North Farmers Market has been going for a number of years now and is thriving to celebrate its 10th anniversary, also participates in Double Bucks and brings fresh produce and food to the neighborhood. On the job side, I already mentioned that the commercial spaces on the 14th Street rehabbed mall are 100% leased. On the safety side, our neighborhood, the Old North footprint, has the least amount of crime of all adjacent neighborhoods, and the crime rate continues to decline, mostly due to community ownership model and neighborhood ownership model, and we have a fully engaged group of neighbors. And on the health side, I mentioned the farmers market, but there is a very adorable walking club in the neighborhood as well, that every Tuesday, a group of about 15 to 20 neighbors go walking for at least a mile, and it actually ends in a reading club in our newly launched urban reading garden. Small things happen over time. But over the last 10 years or 16 years almost, not much has happened because, as one neighbor put it, we've been frozen in a development purgatory because we have too many properties that are owned and just being held by Mr. McKee and his ownership groups that are not part of the redevelopment plan. I am not speaking against the TIF. I am speaking that this should be a condition to the TIF, that this footprint that is not part of his redevelopment plan would be a good faith to see other groups, other neighborhoods, adjacent neighborhoods continue to thrive, to fulfill that promise that was made to the NGA that we do have thriving and growing and sustainable neighborhoods in the north side. Thanks.
Travis, forgive my familiarity, but Travis is the executive director of Venture Cafe, which is
Yes.
over in the 17th Ward. I have a question as well as the alderman from the 21st as well. For clarifications, as I'm looking at this map, I want to make sure I'm interpreting. Old North St. Louis is outside of the TIF area, is that correct?
It is completely outside the TIF area.
They don't have the ward boundaries on here. I know that the TIF area is in the 5th Ward.
Our Old North is split between the 5th Ward and the 3rd Ward.
Okay. I've expressed my concern before as well regarding a project actually in the 7th Ward where we have a developer who had property that wasn't being, I think it's a legitimate concern that it should be one of the things that we review as we award incentives is the progress on vacant buildings. I'm not sure if, given the last, we're nearly out of session, and so there's a certain amount of urgency on this right now, but yeah, I'm not sure this is the right place to do this today, but I want to recognize that I'm sympathetic to that, and I had a similar experience in the Forest Park Southeast area that we were able to eventually work our ways through. I'm not sure if it's a solution that would make you completely happy, but it was a different structure. Alderman from the 21st, did you have some questions?
Sure. Well, my first question was going to be specifically what properties you were talking about, but I see you provided us a map. That's very helpful. What is this green square in the middle
Green square in the middle of the map.
of the map? That's this area in the green.
That is the area that is part of the 14th Street rehabbed mall.
Okay, so that's where most of your development is right now?
Yes.
And so there are a few parcels that are actually in your footprint.
The entire Old North footprint it's highlighted on the other map as well. It goes, north is Branch and south is Chambers, yes.
Okay. All right, and so these parcels here, these are buildings or some of them are lots?
The ones in yellow are buildings. The ones so the yellow stars are buildings. The ones without stars or that aren't in yellow are just empty parcels. I would like to add that since this map was produced, some of those stars have become empty lots, and that is part of the struggle, is that we are losing the architectural fabric of our neighborhood just due to deterioration.
So I've been following this project for a really long time, as you probably know. So Old North, the TIF area excluded Old North after some conversations about the future direction that you guys are planning versus the developer. So have conversations been ongoing about these particular parcels?
The last conversations ceased about a year ago. I've been on the board for just over 2 years now. There was a discussion regarding the Malamphy building, which is at the southernmost end of Old North and is actually within the TIF and the redevelopment footprint of Northside Regeneration. There was a discussion specifically about that building, but those conversations did not continue.
Okay. Do you have projects planned for these, or you just want them for future development?
We want them for future development. We are getting inquiries from individuals on properties that are currently LRA loaned, or even people that have existing properties. It has been a struggle to get financing, either commercial construction loans or traditional financing, because of the number of corporate-owned properties in the neighborhood. And so freeing that up and putting it into the hands of an organization like Old North would allow smaller and individuals to come in to develop those properties.
So I think that's a good idea. I think one of the things that we've, one of the frustrations about the project over the years is the lack of cooperation and partnership with local organizations and neighborhoods. And since these projects were acquired and then were not included in the eventual TIF area, it would make sense, especially for the perspective of the neighborhood, that you would like to get some certainty and to be able to move forward with your projects for that area. So I would support that idea. I don't know if we're in a time crunch to make a modification to this board bill. If it is a time crunch, it's an artificially created one, because, if this is that important, it probably shouldn't have waited till the last few weeks of session before break to introduce it. So I would support that amendment if the chairman would allow it.
No, let me speak. Let me speak.
Thank you. I have just 2 points to address, and Alderman French, your point about whether it could be attached to this board bill or not. Notwithstanding, not talking about the merits of it, but this particular board bill is not the proper vehicle. It's a parcel development agreement specific to this parcel, and we need sort of a clean agreement. Otherwise, you're going to create contingencies that will be beyond the developer's control when he goes to get financing. I mean, there could be a breach that St. Louis Northside Regeneration may breach, and the result would be St. Louis Grocery Group not being able to get financing. So that creates a real problem for lenders to agree to a financing.
I wouldn't as a
The potential solution, as Alderman Rhodey mentioned, was in place in Forest Park Southeast. The LCRA got an option agreement on properties so that they could, if development didn't occur on those properties, and a group came forward that said, we will develop those properties, LCRA could exercise its option, acquire the property, and then sell it to immediately flip it to the new developer.
That's a possibility.
If I
That's what we
could
can
comment just a little bit
Sure.
on the background of that, it was I don't want to disparage any developer here, because a lot of times developers are well-intentioned and things get kind of out of control, that are beyond their control, so I don't want to be judgmental. We had a developer that was active in we've had a developer that was active in the Forest Park Southeast area. They owned a number of properties. They hadn't done anything with them. Concurrent with that, there was a proposal that they were wanting to develop downtown. Over a period of 6 to 9 months, I guess, we went through kind of the brain damage of trying to develop a mechanism that was both fair for the developer but created some certainty for the property that the developer owned in Forest Park Southeast. And it was a relatively lengthy discussion that was done in such a way as to not unwind the financing for the project downtown, but at the same time provided some certainty that something would occur with the property in that neighborhood by a date certain. So I would be probably interested or willing to kind of begin working with the neighborhood and the developer on trying to do something along those lines. I just don't think that
This is not the
this
appropriate
isn't the
place.
right place to do that today. And so that would be my reluctance.
Well, I think the one thing we haven't established is whether or not the developer is willing to do it. And perhaps we can ask the developer.
And in deference, I just don't think this is a fair place to put somebody on the spot to ask them that type of a question without providing them the opportunity, which we did in the case of Forest Park Southeast, to go back and review the property and give some thought to this. Did you want to comment? Yeah, please, well, step forward.
Please, if I can, Paul McKee, Northside Regeneration. I want to clear a bunch of the facts up here. The reason we bought, and we actually own more than they're showing here, I think it's like 72 or 73 parcels inside the Old North area. And when we originally set out, and Alderman Davis remembers this, when we originally set out, it was to be in the TIF area and the north side regeneration boundary. Old North came to us and asked us to exclude them from both. So we bought that ground. We haven't bought another piece of ground in Old North since prior to 2007, nor will we, nor do we plan on developing in Old North. So we pulled it out. We pulled it out of the TIF. We pulled it out of any tax opportunities that they had there. Since then, I've met for years with Sean and Tino, who was the executive director of Old North, and we tried to come up with an arrangement to convey the land to the Old North district. I can't just give land away because there's a master deed of trust on the bank on every piece of ground that's on the north side. So what we offered to them, it was a partnering arrangement that we learned with some of the churches, that if we could work with LRA, if LRA had some ground, I could swap ground with LRA, then LRA give them the ground. That works. Or the other thing we offered to do was Melanthi House, which is an old historic building which needs rehabbing terribly, is inside our district by 1 block, is that we would trade them that building for the land, and we would rehab the Old North. Tino's been gone for a while, and Eric, is there now, and so is, they don't have a new executive director, so there hasn't been any dialogue for about 6 or 10 months. We are anxious to continue that dialogue whenever it's ready.
Forgive me, I'm a little parochial, and I hear these things, I guess, through the grapevine. Is as a result of all the block grant defunding and all that, is Old North, their Cubdo, is that being defunded? Or is that do they have a
No.
Is that
No.
viable?
No, we're not being defunded, no. We're just going through a leadership change, that's all.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
but the
but-
organization is, the full structure and the organization is still
Okay, and
there,
they'll
yeah.
still have professional staff at some
Absolutely,
point?
yes.
Okay, good. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure how that was shaking down up there.
Mr. Chairman, very quickly, I'm probably closer to this than you realize, okay? And I used to be the community organizer over there. So I understand a lot about what's going on. But most especially the last 2 years, I know you've had a lot of situational things that you've been dealing with. And I think the better way to handle this is let's bring in some of the expertise, because we've done it, both of us have done it in our wards in different ways. And I'd like to help you come up with some development plans that have realism to them, number one. And then also help you identify people who are interested in helping you develop some things. And you've got some people already who have done some things, most especially in the mall area with buildings that now have artistic things going on and all of that. And they may be willing to invest even more and bring some of their partners. So this is not the appropriate place to do this. I have a part of my ward right now he's on paper with. And they're not going to do anything with that land without certain entities who are sitting at the table to help make those decisions. Because that's the way it should be, okay? So there's a good way to do this and get you on solid ground and develop you a document that you can hold for the future. Because there's a long way to go in all of this.
Sure.
And every time it comes back in, you need to know you are okay. So I suggest that you do that kind of planning. Don't jump in with just a little something, because that's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really, our purpose for presenting it today, knowing that the likelihood of getting it attached to the bill was not going to be that great, but we needed to continue this dialogue, and we needed the powers to be to know that there is a neighborhood that is celebrating its 200th birthday just to the north of downtown St. Louis, an organization that is celebrating its 35th birthday that's been working really hard for generations. And over the last decade and a half, a lot has come to a halt because of land that just has not been developed. So we're very happy to meet as the organization. We're very happy to meet and talk about this further. And that goes for Mr. McKee as well. We're very happy to talk with you further. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sorry, was there any, people are looking, was there a question of, are everybody okay with the next speaker? Okay. Janet Sanders.
I would like to ask, where is our responsibility for how North St. Louis has been treated for decades? And that's devastation, and in our experience, it's human devastation in particular. So now we are subject to gigantic development plans, which have never appeared with all these decades of suffering. And it is obviously important to us that as these development plans proceed, that the community is included. And we don't see signs where the community is respected and valued by development groups or development forces. So this is what we beg you to look for in your development strategies that you're going to be supporting. That North St. Louis is not your average place where you put down a development project. We're talking about an area that is deeply, deeply devastated. I mean, reporters came from the BBC and they thought they were looking at something from World War II. It's unbelievably horrible what human beings go through in North St. Louis, and it should be citywide, something that we should all be shuddering, for this kind of legacy. So when you bring a development project into this kind of context, how do you do that? It's not going to be like other places that you do development projects. It cannot be, because we're dealing with a legacy of history, and we want to change that history, and we desperately need development. We're human beings. Food, grocery stores, of course, but will those things be properly developed in concert with the people that have suffered so long? And when you talk about poverty and illness and violence, you're talking about people that are often so overburdened and they have very little power, and where are their voices in these situations? And it's very easy for decisions to be made at distance and for developers to be consumed with their plans. And where is the relationship with the developer so that this developer actually knows the community? And we have no conviction that these developers know the community, nor do they respect them, nor do they spend the time learning about people. And so people are left out. And so this is why you receive these kinds of responses. And we beg you to take this deeply seriously, because it is a moment unlike other moments that you may have been present for. And North St. Louis is a gigantic part of this city, and the city has operated in a very strange way for a very long time, in which half the city is destroyed. And if anybody can possibly imagine that that doesn't drag St. Louis down to a depth that is completely unnecessary to have that kind of human loss, that's not straight thinking. So please, when you support your development ideas, please make sure that you think deeply and carefully about an innovative process that includes human beings on the north side being able to have a voice in that development. So best wishes, and always come to us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Larry Chapman? Okay. Tom Bratowski?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a lifelong resident of Old North St. Louis, and I want to express my frustration and, in a sense, my anger that for 13 years, nothing's been done with the properties that Mr. McKee has owned. In fact, he's been rather smug about what could happen. I live on Hubbard Street, and across from me on Wright Street is one of his properties owned by one of his entities. I pick up trash for Mr. McKee. I cut weeds because I want to live here with my family. And it's difficult. I'm a retired person. He's a millionaire. For some reason, he can't get people to take care of the property. and I don't see city enforcement making that happen. And so it continues to languish and continues to go downhill. The walls will fall down, the ceiling will fall in, all of that will happen, and nobody seems to care. And so there are some 70 properties that he owns throughout the neighborhood that he's just allowing to go away. And that's not right. I pay taxes, I maintain my property. I want to see other people do the same. I want to see that property become available to people that make inquiries about rehab because they're interested, because Old North has a good reputation now. You don't want to lose that just because of a languishing thing. You people have a lot of good questions to ask. You also have a lot of power. You can recognize when there are holes in people's presentations. I think the location that they chose for this TIF is the wrong one. I would rather see a grocery store on the corner of Cass and Jefferson. Now, that's listed here as a medical village, which doesn't exist. But that would be on two major streets without a lot of infrastructure problems to create a market area where they propose to put their complex of a store and a gas station is in view of two other gas stations that also have convenience stores. And there's another gas station near us that's going to expand and produce a convenience store. So what I'm saying is that think about this carefully. This is big money. I want to see the money used wisely. I trust that you make good decisions, and I hope that you will. And so I'm opposed to this effort. I want to see kind of a coupling here with something being done with those properties that Mr. McKee is sitting on, because it can't continue just this way. If you come on my street, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and it hurts, and it makes me feel bad. What else can I say? Thank you.
Our last signed-up speaker is James Anderson. Yeah. Okay, at that point, we're done with the public testimony. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, but I didn't sign up, but I do have something real briefly I would like to say. Dr. Paul,
You know, we are 15 minutes into another committee meeting schedule, so ma'am, we have kind of procedures. We had sign up ahead, and here, we'll go ahead and create an exception. Everybody's been patient today, and go ahead. Yeah, yeah, come on up here to the microphone. I'm concerned about us losing our quorum here, though. Ma'am, you'll have to provide the clerk your name for our record.
Okay, my name is Dr. Paulette Sankofa. I live in Old North. The concern I have is in looking at the different plans, there's a lot of concerns for millenniums, which I love, but the concern for seniors like myself. And I'm hoping that whatever plan comes out of this, that there's a different footprint that makes it more sustainable and walkable for seniors to live in, not put us in a whole bunch of little boxes. But even if we're renters or become homeowners, even as seniors, that we can have individual units. And the greatest opportunity for that is to be in a strong dialogue and representation by a group like Old North, where they know the neighbors, know the people, and we can at least get a voice through. So please consider people 65 and older when the plans are being made. And I just want to make sure that that's put in there so that we don't end up with the same footprint of housing that we always end up with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. By city ordinance, we are being recorded for, so we're going to adjourn for just a second because they're ready to run out of tape, and we'll come right back in. So you want to call the sponsor up to close. I just want to, before we recognize her to close, I just want to say one thing to the many of you who've come down here. I've been very fortunate. I'm an alderman in the Central Quarter. We've had a great deal of development over the years. And despite that, I don't think anybody has all the right answers for how to go ahead and make neighborhoods better. It's kind of part art, part science, part experiment. And it's a lot of work. It requires enormous amounts of money. I probably disagree with many of you on your vote today, but I just want to say, from a standpoint of effort, just so you understand, when you create a TIF district like this, and what's going on in this area, you may not be happy with the way it's going on or anything, but just it is unprecedented by St. Louis City standards, the amount of public support, that potentially will be available for the community up there. By comparison, I think this is what, $300 or $400 million TIF. The TIF for Cortex is about $150 million, so it's 3 to 4 times the size of the Cortex TIF, which is the largest TIF in the history of St. Louis. And what that's going to do is provide the new revenue that grows out of these projects, not to go back down to the city, but actually to be kept in the neighborhoods out there. You combine that with the amount of money that the state has made available, it is just really unprecedented for a neighborhood development effort like this, at least from the standpoint of dollar amounts. So I just want to let you know that there may be a disagreement here, but if money is any indication of intent, there is not a bigger expression of public support for a neighborhood in the history of St. Louis, at least if you measure it from the standpoint of dollars and cents. So with that said, Alderwoman. I said I was going to recognize her to close. I will be glad to have those discussions with people, before we have another bill concerning this. And, I think it's an appropriate thing to address, but. Yeah, we have similar situations in properties in Forest Park Southeast. And I think there's a way that we can begin. Yeah. Let's go ahead and recognize the alderman to close here, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to offer. Should I close on this first, then offer that amendment, or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and offer the amendment. Well, then we have to open it up for debate again, discussion again. Should have probably done this first. Okay. We have an amendment before us. The chair will entertain a motion that we take up the amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 93. Anyone make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept amendment to Board Bill number 93.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
You can really explain it.
Mr. Clerk, call the roll.
Alderman Conway?
Aye.
Alderman Davis?
Aye.
Alderman French?
Aye.
Alderman Toder?
Aye.
Alderman Spencer?
Aye.
Alderman Green?
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
We have 7 ayes and 0 nays.
Alderman, you're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Basically, what amendment number 1 to Board Bill 93 does is it increases assistance from the TIF revenues throughout the redevelopment area from 1.3 million to 1.8 million. It should be noted, this does not increase the overall assistance of the 2.8 million. Of that 1 million to be paid from the on-site TIF/CID revenues, it allows TIF revenues to account for 69% of that instead of 61%. I believe this was done in exchange for the increase to 1.8 million. The developer agrees not to capture TIF revenues from the police headquarters located at 1915 Olive and the police retirement system, 2020 Market. And it's been stated that the city and developer will work toward an amendment to the TIF plan to remove the police headquarters and retirement system building from the TIF district.
Okay. So that was a negotiation, as I understand it, between that was a negotiation between the comptroller and the developer on limiting the area revenue TIF area. The area TIF revenue so that it would exclude the incremental revenue that's resulting from those 2 publicly owned facilities that are located within the district. Are there any questions regarding the amendment? We've probably been debating or hearing about the bill with the 2.8 million, and so we really kind of put the cart before the horse when we took up the bill, but.
So the sum of the money staying in just for the police?
Yeah, so when we moved the police facility to the new location, it was now inside the TIF district, and all the salaries, which would generate additional income, or, TIF tax receipts will be excluded from the area TIF. So that'll stay in city general fund as opposed to being deployed within the TIF district. Okay, questions regarding this? Alderman Conway. Alderman French.
Yeah, so I have a question here. So looking at the last section there, under TIF revenues, notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained herein, shall not include any tax increment financing revenues generated from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. So it suggests, it seems to read that there still will be monies generated from that building, but it can't go towards this project. Are we just taking that building out of the TIF?
That is the ultimate solution.
Wouldn't that be the easiest thing, just to take that building out of the TIF?
It's just a process. Under the TIF Act, we got to go back to the TIF Commission to change the boundaries. So that's hopefully going to occur in the very near future, but it just can't happen at this.
So this suggests that TIF revenue would still be generated from that building, but it can't be used for any of these projects. Instead, it says the parties agree that the city may use such revenues for other purposes, including without limitation, declaring such revenues as surplus.
And when we declare it as surplus, that's a term of art under the TIF Act. It says, instead of going from the special allocation fund, we just put it back in the general fund.
Okay. So will there be an effort to take that building out of the TIF? Okay.
Yeah. That's, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Not only would earnings tax on police officers be moving in to the TIF district, the assessed value of those buildings is now zero because they're publicly owned. So it affects the generation of pilots. So it benefits both the city and the developer to just get it out and adjust the base assessed value accordingly.
So have earnings tax revenues been going into this TIF over the last year or so since that building's been in operation?
My understanding is that it has been extremely difficult to calculate because the nature of a police officer job is sometimes they're working downtown, sometimes they're working somewhere else in the city, and you'd have to somehow figure out how to prorate that and track all that, and that's too much trouble.
Okay. No further questions.
Alderman Kotar.
No questions.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question, I suppose, is for Mr. McKee, and I'm going to ask it now because I don't foresee another opportunity in the future. With regards to some of the, I just looked up very quickly the first 3 properties on this list that are owned by your company, and I noticed that there are open violations, within the last year on forestry, vacant building. Would you please be willing, when, I'm just the alderman of the 20th, but when we don't do TIFs, we haven't had one, but we do tax abatement, and we do look at the history of the developer and the way that they are treating their current property investments in the city. Would you please mow your lawn?
I'll respond.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, we've recognized the Alderwoman from the 5th to close, so there's no more testimony.
We're discussing the amendment right now.
I'm going to rule the point of order out of order, or rule against it. I'm going to, with all due respect, Alderman, I prematurely recognized her to close, so we, in essence, reopened up the debate when we brought up the amendment. So, Mr. McKee, if you care to answer that.
Yes, there's a crew of all local people. They're actually called the McKee Brothers that have 40 people that maintain and cut grass regularly to the tune of $500,000 a year in grass cutting. The violations you're looking at are old, We have a computer record that you can read regularly of when the grass is cut in accordance with the ordinance, and the people of the community, these 40 people are working daily to do that. And we continue to maintain our properties that way in accordance with the ordinance that us and the city have agreed to and the tracking mechanism that we have agreed to follow.
I appreciate that, thank you. They're not that old, some of them are less than 1 year, but I appreciate the explanation, and I look forward to future.
All of those are clear, because what ends up happening when they cut the grass, sometimes when they take care of the city stuff, they run the moors over them, and they just send us bills, and they're done incorrectly. We have a computerized sheet that goes back and adjusts those.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Green.
Thank you. I have one quick question as well. You know, after listening to, I guess, some of the testimony today, and also, you know, actually having Paul McKee in front of us, which hasn't happened, I think, in my tenure of being down here so far, I guess you know, we're hearing a lot of, I think, disconnect between the developer and the community. And so the question I have is, you know, in other cities, what they've done is something called a community benefit agreement, where before a development moves forward, there is an agreement that is signed on behalf of the neighborhood organization or neighborhood community development group with the developer, making that commitment that they're going to work together on the development, and have that neighborhood buy-in. Has that been something that you have looked into or have been willing to do, and is that maybe the middle ground in some of this?
No, that's not something that I have looked into, but I can stand here before you and say that we've had several community meetings. We have regular ward meetings. We've emailed all of the constituents of the Fifth Ward, and sometimes you don't get a lot of input from certain areas of the ward, and then you see them pop up at instances like this and voice their concerns. But I can say that I have been in several meetings with Paul McKee and North St. Louis when Sean Thomas was a part of that, and I know that the developer was willing to work. I mean, there were some situations where we all sat down and tried to see what some of those goals were. So I'm kind of blown away by some of my constituents here today saying that they haven't been able to contact him, but I'm hopeful, and hearing Paul McKee speak to Mr. Sheridan, I'm hopeful that they can continue to try to work together, because it's in the best interest of the entire area if we all work together and get some things accomplished.
I agree with that. Thank you.
Okay, we've been through, Alderwoman, you are now recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say that I would ask for your favorable support of this development. It has been a long time coming, and I don't think no one has witnessed it and have endured some of the strife just to get some things done much longer than I have. I'll say this time and time again, it hasn't been the most ideal situation, but not too many people have been beating down my door trying to develop that part of the city. I lived in that community all of my life. I've seen the devastation. It blows me away to have to go to South St. Louis on Grand and Gravois to shop and save just to grocery shop. And so this is something that's important. I think what we have here before us, it's something that the wheel was rolling on sometime prior to me even getting here when the TIF was approved. And I think that now is our opportunity to try to do something better. I mean, we've seen all of the disinvestment in that side of town for a long, long time, and it has been a complicated process. I've learned a lot through it. I think this TIF amount is something that's unprecedented, but I think this is an opportunity for us to move forward and try to address the needs of that community, which has suffered a long, long time. So I would just ask for your favorable support.
Okay, the clerk reminds me procedurally, I'm always sloppy here. We will now entertain a motion to adopt the amendment, and then we will go ahead and quickly, hopefully, follow that.
That we adopt the amendment to amendment number 1 to Board Bill 93.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Conway?
Aye.
Alderman Davis? Aye. Alderman French?
Aye.
Alderman Cooter?
Aye.
Alderman Spencer?
Aye.
Alderman Green? Aye.
Aye.
We have 7 ayes and 0 noes.
Okay, now we will go ahead, and again, I keep putting the cart
Move
before.
that we pass Board Bill 93 as amended out of committee with a do-pass recommendation.
Been moved, it's been seconded. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Discussion?
That we had discussed, but
We didn't discuss this motion.
we usually go ahead and we take a vote after we do the discussion. But in deference, we'll go ahead, Alderman.
Sure. So I just have a few comments about this. Number one is, I wish these two things were separated. I think subsidizing the grocery store is a good idea. I think that is something that is going to benefit the community. I think subsidizing the gas station is a bad idea, especially considering the close proximity to existing gas stations. While there may be a need for grocery stores, it is hard to argue that there is a need for a publicly subsidized gas station in that area, a lot of gas stations. In fact, across North St. Louis, the gas stations are popping up left and right without public subsidy. The other thing, too, is to the folks who came down here specifically from Old North, leverage is a very important thing, and I think Old North has been talking about getting control of these parcels, these McKee-owned parcels, for many years, and there has not been progress. I think this is an opportunity to use this bill as leverage to get that, and if there was some kind of way that this bill could be held on the informal calendar until that thing actually happened, I think that would benefit the community. Both the city and Paul McKee understand leverage. You might recall that not too long ago, the city sold Paul McKee LRA land. When the NGA project came to include this parcel of land that included his properties and those LRA properties, he used whatever leverage he could, including refusing to sell that land back to the city until he got what he wanted. In return, the city had to implement eminent domain on his properties, start that process, purchase outstanding notes in order to use leverage to get him to act how he wanted to. I don't think it's improper at all for the Old North and the citizens of that community to use whatever leverage they can to try to get control of their neighborhood back from this developer who has basically held it hostage for a decade. There have been a lot of promises from this developer over the years, a lot of promises, and very few have actually come to fruition. And I think we need to take that into account when we're giving out public subsidy. I remember at the beginning of this thing, folks in that community were promised that there would be no eminent domain on residential properties. That was promised from the developer. That was promised in writing from the mayor. And here we go. We've used eminent domain on residential properties. So these people have been lied to repeatedly over a decade. I think it is right for them to fight for control of their neighborhood back. I think it's right for them to be involved in the direction of their neighborhoods. I don't think that's too much to ask, and I think this board needs to do whatever we can to empower the citizens to have some say in what happens in their neighborhoods. That's it.
Any other comments? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Conway? Aye. Alderman Davis?
Aye.
Alderman French?
No.
Alderman Coder?
Aye.
Alderman Spencer?
No.
Alderman Green?
No.
Chairman Rhodey?
Aye.
We have 4 ayes and 3 noes.
By our vote, we've passed that out with bill out with a do pass recommendation. Thank you all for your time. We'll consider today's meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.